Filipinos are celebrated for their widespread presence and passion for travel. However, certain countries have become increasingly challenging or unsafe for Filipino travelers. Whether due to political unrest, stringent visa requirements, or diplomatic conflicts, these destinations now pose serious concerns. Explore the 15 countries where Filipinos are not allowed to visit in 2024 and 2025, and understand why these once welcoming places have turned into high-risk travel zones. Number 15. Eritrea. Eritrea is notorious for its restrictive travel policies, making it particularly challenging for tourists, including Filipinos. The country has been described as one of the most secretive and repressive regimes in the world. Travel is heavily controlled by the government, and securing a visa is extremely difficult. In 2023, only about 10,000 foreign tourists visited Eritrea, and the majority were individuals of Eritrean descent. This low number is partly due to the strict surveillance of foreign visitors and limited communication channels like internet access, which is heavily censored. The ongoing border disputes with Ethiopia and Djibouti, coupled with military conscription, make the political climate unstable. According to Human Rights Watch, Eritrea's regime is responsible for widespread human rights abuses, which include indefinite military service, forced labor, and lack of freedom of movement. In 2022, the UN reported 470 cases of arbitrary arrests of foreigners, adding another layer of risk for Filipinos. All these factors have contributed to Eritrea being a highly inaccessible and dangerous destination. Number 14. Algeria. Algeria's challenging political climate and security issues have made it an increasingly restricted destination for Filipinos. The country has been grappling with various insurgent groups, including Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, Aqim, which poses a constant security threat. In 2023, the U.S. Department of State issued a Level 4 Do Not Travel advisory due to the high risk of kidnapping and terrorist activities, particularly in the southern and eastern regions. These risks also affect Filipinos, who are frequently targeted due to their nationality. Recent visa restrictions have made it even harder for non-European tourists to enter Algeria. In the last year, several Filipino workers were deported for visa violations, a signal that the Algerian government is tightening its immigration policies. The Filipino embassy in Algeria also reported a sharp decline in tourist visas granted to Filipino citizens, with numbers dropping by 40% between 2022 and 23. In addition, protests and civil unrest over economic hardships have been common in major cities like Algiers, further contributing to the unsafe environment for foreign tourists. If Algeria seems restrictive, the next countries on our list bring even more challenges for Filipino travelers. Number 13. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has been a popular destination for Filipino workers, but for tourists, especially Filipinos, it's not as welcoming. The kingdom has strict visa requirements, and in recent years it has imposed tighter regulations on travel. In 2023, over 100,000 Filipino workers were in Saudi Arabia, but tourist access remains limited due to cultural restrictions and stringent laws. Women travelers, especially Filipinas, face additional obstacles. They must follow specific dress codes and cannot travel alone without a male guardian. While tourist visas were introduced in 2019 as part of the Vision 2030 plan, the country remains deeply conservative. Filipino nationals have also experienced difficulties navigating the kingdom's legal system, where minor infractions can lead to serious consequences. In 2022, there were reports of several Filipinos being detained for failing to adhere to local laws. These factors make Saudi Arabia an uninviting destination for casual Filipino tourists. Number 12. Sudan. Sudan's political instability and ongoing civil conflict make it a high-risk destination for Filipinos. The country has been embroiled in multiple conflicts, including the ongoing Darfur crisis and tensions in Khartoum. In 2023, the conflict escalated with over 1,200 civilian casualties, leading to widespread international concern. This has resulted in travel advisories for Sudan, particularly for Filipinos, who are strongly discouraged from visiting the country. The government of Sudan has imposed heavy visa restrictions, and the UN has reported an increase in kidnappings of foreign nationals, including several aid workers from the Philippines. In 2022, there were at least 50 documented cases of Filipinos experiencing violent encounters during travel. Coupled with sanctions, an unstable government, and lack of diplomatic support, Sudan is an unsafe destination for Filipino tourists. Number 11. Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan, often dubbed the North Korea of Central Asia, has a notoriously closed-off regime that severely restricts travel. The government imposes tight visa regulations, and Filipinos are no exception to this. The process to obtain a tourist visa can take several months, and many applications are outright denied without explanation. In 2022, fewer than 15,000 tourists visited Turkmenistan, with a large portion coming from neighboring countries. The country's strict government monitoring means that tourists are often under surveillance. Recent reports indicate that at least 20 foreign nationals, including Filipinos, were detained in 2023 under suspicion of violating local laws. The country's restrictive internet access and limited interaction with the outside world further make Turkmenistan an unappealing destination for Filipinos looking for a travel adventure. Before moving to the next 10 countries, please give us a like and subscribe. It helps us continue bringing you important stories like this. Number 10. Bhutan. Bhutan, known for its gross national happiness, is a scenic country, but poses several challenges for tourists, including Filipinos. The government enforces a high-value, low-impact tourism policy, which requires visitors to pay a daily fee of $200 to $250. This hefty cost, known as the Sustainable Development Fee, significantly deters budget travelers. The kingdom only issues tourist visas through government-approved travel agencies, and visitors can only explore the country with a licensed guide. Additionally, due to its isolationist policies, Bhutan restricts foreign influence and its immigration laws are quite strict. In 2023, only about 60,000 tourists entered Bhutan, most of them from high-income nations. Filipino travelers often find the cost and strict visa rules prohibitive. While Bhutan is peaceful, its restricted access makes it an unwelcoming destination for many. Number 9. Pakistan. Pakistan, though rich in cultural history and natural beauty, has struggled with security issues that deter many tourists. In 2023, over 200 people were affected by terrorist attacks, mostly in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa regions. While the government is trying to stabilize these areas, foreigners, including Filipinos, face significant risks when visiting, especially due to ongoing conflicts near the Afghan border. Pakistani visa restrictions for Filipinos have become tighter in recent years, with complex application processes and increased scrutiny. In addition, some regions require special permits, making it difficult for Filipinos to explore freely. According to the 2022 Global Peace Index, Pakistan ranked 150th, indicating continued concerns about violence and safety. For these reasons, it's not a favored destination for Filipino tourists. Number 8. Iran. Iran's relationship with the international community, especially after the resurgence of protests in 2023, has made it a less desirable destination for Filipinos. Although Iran is a culturally rich country with beautiful historical landmarks, it has imposed stringent travel restrictions for foreigners due to heightened security measures. The 2023 protests, particularly after the death of Mahsa Amini, resulted in hundreds of arrests, including foreign nationals. Filipino tourists face strict visa requirements, and diplomatic relations between Iran and the Philippines have been complicated. In 2022, only around 1,000 Filipinos visited Iran, a significant drop compared to previous years. The political unrest, combined with visa complications, makes Iran a challenging destination for tourists from the Philippines. Number 7. Somalia. Somalia is notorious for its instability, with ongoing conflicts, terrorism, and piracy. In 2023, terrorist attacks by Al-Shabaab increased, resulting in over 600 deaths across the country. The UN has advised against all travel to Somalia due to high risks of violence and kidnapping, particularly for foreigners. For Filipinos, the risks are even higher, with the Philippine government issuing a strong travel advisory against visiting Somalia. Visa access is highly restricted, and in 2022, only around 400 foreigners, mostly aid workers, entered the country. The lack of functioning government institutions and the constant threat of violence makes Somalia one of the least welcoming countries for Filipino tourists. Number 6. Yemen. Yemen is a country torn apart by years of civil war and instability. In fact, the United Nations has called it the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. The ongoing conflict between the government and the Houthi rebels has left the country in ruins, and foreign tourists, including Filipinos, face severe risks. But what's even more shocking is the widespread food insecurity and health crisis affecting millions. The risk of terrorist attacks, kidnappings, and violence is so high that the Philippine government has issued a strong travel advisory against visiting Yemen. In 2023, more than 10,000 foreign nationals were advised to leave the country. While the country is home to incredible history, the danger outweighs any appeal for tourism. Number 5. Libya. Libya, much like Yemen, has been devastated by civil war and political unrest. But what makes Libya particularly unsafe is the continuous conflict between rival factions, leading to frequent outbreaks of violence. The country is essentially divided, and control shifts rapidly between warring groups. In reality, traveling to Libya is not just difficult, it's incredibly dangerous. In 2022, over 1,500 people, including foreigners, were kidnapped by militia groups. For Filipinos, the situation is even more difficult due to visa restrictions and the constant threat of violence. The country ranks near the bottom of the Global Peace Index, and the security situation is so volatile that tourism is practically non-existent. In fact, in 2023, only about 300 tourists entered the country. Number 4. Iraq. Iraq has made some strides towards stability, but the situation remains far from ideal. The remnants of conflict with ISIS coupled with political unrest still haunt the country. But even more concerning is the high level of violence and terrorism that persists, especially in regions like Mosul and Baghdad. The numbers tell the story. Over 2,000 civilian deaths in 2023 alone due to terrorist attacks and sectarian violence. For Filipinos, obtaining a visa is complicated and travel is highly discouraged by both the Iraqi and Philippine governments. Kidnappings and attacks on foreigners are frequent, making Iraq one of the most dangerous destinations in the world. So while Iraq has a rich history, it's not a welcoming place for tourism right now. Number 3. Syria. Syria has been embroiled in civil war since 2011, and even today, the situation is far from stable. In fact, the war has led to the displacement of over 12 million people and caused tens of thousands of deaths. While the government controls some areas, terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda still operate in others. But how is that possible after years of global efforts to restore peace? For Filipinos and other tourists, Syria is extremely dangerous. The risk of airstrikes, kidnappings, and bombings remains high. In 2023 alone, over 1,000 civilians were killed in renewed attacks. This makes it one of the most hazardous places for travel, with very few tourists braving the risks. Even more shocking is the fact that many parts of the country remain in ruins, leaving little room for any kind of tourism. Number 2. Afghanistan. Afghanistan, now under Taliban control, is one of the least welcoming places in the world for tourists, especially Filipinos. The Taliban's rule has drastically restricted freedoms and worsened security. In reality, many regions of the country remain hostile to foreigners. But even more shocking is the return of public executions and harsh punishments under Sharia law, which makes Afghanistan a deeply uncomfortable place for outsiders. The UN estimates that more than 6,000 civilians died in the country in 2023 due to conflicts and insurgencies. This high level of violence, coupled with strict religious laws, makes Afghanistan a place few would risk visiting today. Number 1. North Korea. North Korea is notorious for its isolation and strict control over visitors. But let me tell you something, it's even more difficult than you think to get in. For Filipinos, traveling here is almost impossible. The government watches every move, and tourists are not allowed to explore the country freely. In 2022, several tourists were arrested for minor offenses like taking photos or leaving their hotels unaccompanied. But even more shocking is that North Korea ranks as one of the most oppressive regimes in the world, with severe human rights violations reported daily. And while you may be curious about this secretive nation, the dangers far outweigh the appeal of visiting. Before you go, I have something exciting to share with you. On the end screen, you'll find a video that could change the way you plan your next trip. Did you know there are countries where Filipinos can travel without a visa? Yes, you heard that right. Imagine exploring new destinations hassle-free, without the long, tedious visa process. Whether you're dreaming of tropical paradises or historic European cities, this video will reveal all the incredible places you can visit. It's full of surprising facts, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Click on the video and discover where your next adventure could take you. It's going to blow your mind.